Welcome back to Globesweeper Hex Puzzler. We only have 2 levels left to go through, and today we're going to look at Silver Fern, which might not be as difficult as the ring. I still think it's a very lengthy level. It's probably going to take a long time, and while it's not super hard, it does have its tricky sections here and there, so it might take a while to explain everything. Luckily for me, this level is divided up into 3 very neat sections, so should I make a mistake in one of them or fail to explain something well enough, I can always just re-record that one section, which means there might be a couple of awkward cuts here and there if I have to stitch together multiple runs, so to speak. But yeah, let's jump into it. So here we have Silver Fern with the 3 different sections, and I would advise pressing the X button on your keyboard to mark all of the lines at once in this puzzle, because some of the lines go across to different areas of the map and they can be a little hard to keep track of otherwise, and with all of them marked, when we're done with a line we can just click them to unmark them, so we know that we don't have to think about that line anymore. So to start, let's start with this top fern leaf here. So we have a 2 cluster here that has 1 tile, we have to go up here for 2 tiles, and then the cluster is done, so disconnect the connecting tiles. And the 1 here is done. Here we have a 5 area with only 5 tiles, so all of them have to be marked. And here we have an 8 cluster with 4 tiles that has to go up here for 5 tiles, has to go up here for 6 tiles, but now we need 2 more tiles for this 8 cluster. In this line, we can only use 1 tile, which means the 8 can't get all the way over here. It can't reach this tile, because if it goes over here, then it could only go here, and then we can't reach this tile. If it goes here, then this tile is already disconnected, and it still can't reach this tile. And also, the 8 has to use one of these 2 tiles. Because we only have 6 tiles in this 8 cluster, we can use 7 tiles, 1 more tile here for 7, and then we have to use the 1 tile in this line for 8, which will be one of these 2 tiles, meaning this tile cannot be marked, which gives us a 2 here, so we can mark these 2 tiles. And now this line is done, and the 8 cluster is completed. Here we have a minimum 3 line, so this tile has to become a minimum 3 chain, so 2 and 3. And then we have to disconnect this tile, because if we don't, if we make it a 4 chain, then we don't have enough space left over in this line to make another 3 chain for this minimum 3. So that has to be disconnected, and in fact we have to disconnect all of the lines, the tiles in this line, because we have 1 3 chain and we can't fit another one in. So those are all deleted. This 0 is done. When it's just normal tiles, I'm probably not going to explain it too much. There's going to be quite a lot of normal tile solving in this. So here we have a minimum 2, 1 tile here, we have to make it a minimum 2 chain, and then we have to preserve a 2 chain for it, so disconnect this tile. Normal tiles here. Here we have a minimum 2, we have 1 tile here, we have to mark this one to make it a minimum 2 chain. But then we only have 5 tiles in this line, so at this point we can't mark another tile. We can't make this a 3 chain, because then we would have to make also a 2 chain somewhere, a separate 2 chain, to satisfy the minimum 2, and once we've used this tile, we can't fit a separate 2 chain that isn't connected to this center tile. So this center tile has to be disconnected, but then maybe we'll have another one here, we don't know yet. But that gave us a minimum 3 tile here. So in these 5 tiles we have to have a 3 chain somewhere, and since we have only 5 tiles, that means we have to use the center tile here. If we don't use this, if we disconnect this tile, we only have 2 tiles here and 2 tiles here, and we can't make a 3 chain. So this tile has to be marked, and we can also already disconnect this tile here. Because we have this one already marked, we can't make a 3 chain like this, because then it would be a 4 chain, and it wouldn't leave room for a 3 chain. So our only options to make a 3 chain for this minimum 3 is to use these 3 tiles or these 3 tiles. So this one you can disconnect. And because we disconnect this one, we can no longer fit a 2 chain in this line, so, or another one, I should say, so this line is completed. Now here we need 2 groups in these 3 tiles, which means we have to mark at least one of these 2 tiles, and we have to use this tile, because we can only fit 1 group in these 2 tiles here. So this has to be 1 group, and then 1 more group here. That completes this 1 tile here, so these tiles are disconnected, and we get this for the 1 and this for the 1. That completes the 3 chain here for the 3, minimum 3, so that's disconnected, and this tile is done. Now here, this line already has 3 tiles, so all of these are disconnected. We get a 4 tile here, and the 2 here, and I guess we can go onward here a little bit. 2 groups in 3 tiles means we can't mark the center tile. If we do, then we only have 1 group, and we can't add a second one, because this would still be part of the same group. So we have to disconnect this center tile and add this tile to make 2 separate groups for this tile. The 2 here is done, the 1 is done, this 3 cluster has to go on here for 2 tiles, that completes this 2, and then the 3 cluster has to go down here to get all 3 tiles. We get that for the 1, some normal tiles here, and a 4 cluster that has to use all of these tiles here. Now here, this line, this 2 line, only has 2 tiles left, so we have to mark all of them, or both of them. And this 3 line has 1 tile and only has 2 more left, so we have to mark both of those. Now let's hold off on this a little bit and just complete this little area. So here, we have a not 3 tile with 2 tiles marked. So we can't mark this 3rd tile, because then we mark 3 tiles for the not 3. Also, we can unmark this line, I forgot. So that has to be disconnected, giving us a 4, that's now done. We get a 7 cluster here with 5 tiles and only access to 2 more tiles, and we have to mark both of them to get the 7 cluster completed. And then this 2 needs this tile here. So now we can go back and look at these 2 3 clusters. So they both have 2 tiles and can only have 1 more tile. So either one of these 2 tiles in between them can't be marked, because if we mark either one of these, we would connect them up and give them 5 tiles total. So these we can disconnect. And now, for both of them, we can just look in the same way. This 3 needs to use one of these 2 tiles to complete the 3 cluster, which means this tile that's connected to both of them cannot be marked. If we were to mark this tile, then this 3 cluster would have to connect up into a 4 chain in one of 2 ways. So, since we use one of these tiles, this one has to be disconnected. Same over here. Since we have 2 tiles, we will use one of these tiles. This tile that's connected to both of these tiles cannot be marked, or we can't avoid making a 4 chain for this 3. So that is also disconnected. Now up here, we got a 1 tile, and again, we know the 3 cluster here has to use one of these 2 tiles, which will complete the 1, so these 2 tiles cannot be marked, and we get this one marked, and this one marked for this 1. So now that's done, and then we do a similar but opposite thing on the other side. Here, this 3 uses only one of these 2 tiles, so the 4 here can only have 1 tile here, and has to have 2, 3, 4 in these 3 tiles, so all of them have to be marked. And because we've marked these now, this 3 cannot connect up to this tile, or it connects up to this 3 chain here. So we get that completed, and then this line has a maximum 2, which means we have to have a 2 chain in these 3 tiles, which means we have to mark the center tile. If we remove the center tile, we only get a single tile here and a single tile here, and we can't make a 2 chain. So this has to be marked, completing our 2 chain, and then we disconnect this tile. Here we have a minimum 2, and we have a tile here, so this tile has to become a minimum 2 chain either here or here. But at this point, we cannot use this tile. If we mark this tile, we would have to make it a minimum 2 chain, so we would have to mark this tile as well, and that would give us a 3 chain, and we no longer have space to complete a 2 chain for this minimum 2. So this tile can be removed, giving us a 0, and now we can complete the 2 chain here. And now we just get some normal tiles to solve, so nothing really to say about this. Minimum 2, make a 2 chain and then disconnect it. Minimum 3, we have a tile here, has to be 2 and 3, and we have to preserve a 3 chain so we can't add in this 4th tile. Maximum 1, we have a tile here, we can't make it a 2 chain, so disconnect that. This 1 is done, and the 2 here. Now here we have a not 6 cluster with 5 tiles, and it has 1 more potential tile. If we were to add this tile, we would make it 6 tiles, so we have to delete this one to preserve it as a 5 cluster. Now here we got a 5 area with 5 tiles already, so this one is disconnected. That gives us a maximum 2 tile, and we need to have a 2 chain in these 3 tiles. Same as we've seen before, the center tile has to be marked now, because if we delete this tile, we can't make a 2 chain anymore. So the 2 chain has to be here and here, or here and here. Now at this point, it's the same as we saw before with this minimum 2 in 4 tiles. Same deal here, we have a line of 4 tiles and a minimum 2. we have a tile here that has to become a 2-chain either here or here, but at this point, this tile can no longer be marked. If this is marked, we have to go on here, making it a 3-chain, and then we don't leave a 2-chain for the minimum 2. So that has to be disconnected. We get the 0 here, and some normal tiles here. And we get the 2-chain for this one, and we get the 2-chain for this line. Now here we got a 2 area with 2 tiles already, so disconnect all of the other tiles. And here we have a maximum 1 area. And for this 2, we have to mark 2 of these tiles, which means now the opposite. We can't mark the center tile here, because if we do mark the center tile, then we would have to make a 2-chain either using these 2 tiles or these 2 tiles, which would be too many for the max 1. So the center tile now has to be disconnected, and we get these 2 tiles marked for the 2. So now this is done for the 2, and then here we have to disconnect these 2 tiles, because then otherwise we would make a 2-chain, so those are gone, and this is marked, and now we can just mark some normal tiles again. Up to that point. Now this line needs 4 tiles, and only has 4 tiles, so we have to mark all 4 of these tiles, and the line is done. This 2 is now done, and we continue on up here a little bit, and can I already... No, okay, we can't do this yet. We rope around from the other side. I couldn't quite remember. But yeah, here we have a 2 cluster that's already done, so disconnect all the tiles around it. And then we get some tiles here. And we can solve over this way. I guess let's finish this up. So here we have a 3 cluster with 2 tiles. Same as we've seen before, we have to use one of these 2 tiles, so the one touching both of them cannot be marked, and we can delete this tile. And again, this one will be completed using one of these tiles, so these ones cannot be marked. We get this one and delete this tile. Now at that point, here we have a maximum 4 line, and we have to have a 4-chain. We only have a tile here and a tile here. We have to fit a 4-chain somewhere in these 5 tiles, which means we have to use the center 3 tiles, because the only ways to make a 4-chain in these tiles is to use these 4 tiles or these 4 tiles. So we have to mark the 3 in the center, and since we already had a tile there, we now have our 4-chain, and we can disconnect this tile and complete the line. So that's done now, and we can just solve some normal tiles here. Now let's do the stuff we left behind here. So here we have a 4 area with only 2 tiles, and we have to mark these 2 as well. That completes this 2 and the 1. Here we have a not 2 cluster with 2 tiles, so we can't leave it as only 2 tiles. We have to add in at least 1 more, so we have to go on here. That completes this 3, and the 1 here is done, and the 3 here needs these 2. This 2 cluster can't connect up to anything else, and the 2 here is done, and the 1 there. Now here we have to think about the overlap between this 7 and this 9. So if we count the 7 here, we have 3 tiles, 4, 5, and we need 2 more tiles in this area. In the shared area here, we have these 4 tiles. So for this 7, we can at most use 2 of these 4 tiles. And if we count the 9 here, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. We can at most have 5, 6, and then we get 7, 8, and 9. So we have to use these 3 tiles, and we will need to use 2 of the tiles in the 2 of the 4 tiles here, completing this 7. So none of the tiles outside of that area can be marked. Now that's done. Here we have a 3 tile that needs 3 of these tiles, but the 1 here can only have 1 of these 2 at most, so the 3 needs these 2 tiles, and 1 of these tiles, completing the 1, so this tile cannot be marked. The 2 here is done, and we get that, and this 4 marks all of these 4 tiles, completing this 3 now. Now at that point, this 4 groups line has 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, and 4 groups. We could still mark this tile, that would still be part of 4 groups, but at this point, these 2 tiles can no longer be marked, because that would add a 5th group, so these can be disconnected. That gives us a 3 tile here that needs both of these. This 3 cluster now needs to go up here, and then get disconnected. This 3 now marks this tile, completing this line, and this 5 cluster already has 5 tiles, so this tile is disconnected. So now we're done with that part, and we can move on up the fern leaf. So here, we have a maximum 2 area. So this 2-chain cannot be more than a 2-chain, so we can't mark this tile. And Now we just switch over to the 6 here. Since we removed this tile, we have 1 tile here, we need 5 more, and we only have 5 more tiles, so all of these have to be marked. Now we go back to the max 2, which has a 2 chain here, and can't have a 3 chain, so this has to be disconnected. And then we solve some normal tiles for a little bit. Until that point. Here we have a 3 cluster that has to go on here for 2 tiles. And then same thing we've seen before, we use one of these tiles, so not the one that touches both of them. And can we already do this one? Yeah, we can. So here we have a 6 area, we have 1 tile, we need to add 5 more tiles here. But this 3 can only use one of these 2 tiles, so if we count to 6, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we have to use these 3 and this tile. That gave us this 3 cluster, that's already done, so this can be disconnected, and this cluster is now completed. Now, we could go right or left, let's continue left here. This line, minimum 4, has to have a 4 chain in these 6 tiles, which means we have to use the 2 center tiles, because the only ways to make a 4 chain is to use these 4 tiles, or these 4 tiles, or these 4 tiles. So if we disconnect either one of these 2 center tiles, we would only be able to use make a chain of 3 instead of a chain of 4. So the 2 center tiles have to be marked, and then we'll either use 1 on either side, or 2 on the left, or 2 on the right. But because we've done that, we connected this up to the 5 cluster, and this 5 cluster has to be part of the 4 chain here. So since we have 3 tiles in this 5 cluster, the 4 chain will complete the 5, either, again, using 2 here, that would be a 5 chain, or these 2 would be a 5 chain, or these would also be a 5 chain. So because of that, this tile can no longer be marked. If we were to mark this tile, this 5 would inevitably get 6 tiles because of the minimum 4 in this line. So that has to be disconnected, giving us a 1, letting us disconnect all of these tiles and get our 4 chain over here. Now we have normal tiles. A maximum 2 in 3 tiles. Again, we have to use the center because that's the only way to make a 2 chain, either this way or this way. So we get our 2 chain now and disconnect this tile. There we go. And I guess let's go back and complete this area. So here we have a 4 area with 2 tiles and only 2 more, so we have to mark both of them. 4 cluster here with 4 tiles, so it's already done. Disconnect all of them. And then the 2 here needs this tile. And this 4 area has 4 tiles already, so these 2 tiles are removed. Now at that point, here we have a maximum 3 line with 1 tile here and 2 tiles here. We have to have a 3 chain somewhere, and the 3 chain has to be in this area of 4 tiles. So since we only have 1 more than we need to make a chain, we once again have to use the 2 center tiles here. Either we make a 3 chain using these 3 tiles, or these 3 tiles. So we have to mark these 2 tiles, and that completes our 3 chain, so this one has to be disconnected. Here we have a maximum 1, so we can't make a 2 chain here, so disconnect that tile. Now at that point, we can actually look at 2 things. Let's look at this minimum 3 here. We have to have a 3 chain, and we can't fit a 3 chain in here, so we can delete these tiles, and we have to fit a 3 chain in these tiles here. So that's already done, and this tile is marked for the 3, and we can complete this line here, like so. And then here, this line needs 3 groups in 5 tiles. We have 1 group already. If we were to add this tile, that would not be a new group, so the earliest point we can add a new group would be to skip 1 tile and add this one. And then we only have 2 groups, so the only way to add another one, the quickest way, would be to skip 1 more tile and add the final tile. So we only have just enough tiles to make 3 groups. In 5 tiles, we can only have 3 groups maximum. So we have to mark each tile and separate 1 gap, or erase 1 gap between them, or 1 tile between them, rather. So now this 2 area is already done with 2 tiles, so this one is deleted, and that is marked. And we can solve some tiles here normally. This 4 chain, or 4 cluster, has 1 tile, has to go on here for 2, 3, and 4, and then get disconnected here. This line of 3 already has 3 tiles, so these ones are all deleted. Here we have a big area of maximum 3, so we can only have chains of 3 or fewer. We have a chain of 3 here, so we have to disconnect the tiles connected to it. That gives us a 1 here, so we can continue that way, and this 3 marks these 2 tiles. Now at that point, this 7 here has 2 tiles, and we need to mark 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we need to mark all of the tiles that it has access to. This 4 here, no, it's not this one quite yet. This 4? Yeah, this 4 has 1 tile and only 3 more options, so we have to mark all of them. Now at that point, right, we go back to the maximum 3 here. So here we also have a 3 chain, so we can't add in this tile or it would make a 4 chain. So this one has to be disconnected, giving us this 3 area, which already reaches 3 tiles, so this tile has to be deleted. Now at that point, we don't look at that yet. Now, since we deleted this tile, we can look at this 4 area now. We have 2 tiles and only 2 more available, so we have to mark both of them. Whoops. That gave us a 5 cluster that's already completed, so disconnect the tiles connected to it. And this 2 is done. Here we have a 5 area that has 4 tiles, and this 1 needs 1 of these tiles. So that will complete the 5 area, so these 2 tiles can no longer be marked. And we get these marked here. 2 cluster has to go up here. This 1 is now done. And we solve these tiles normally. A 3 cluster has to go up here for 2 and 3. The 7 has to go up here for 2. And then now, we have to think about what this 7 needs. Can we solve the 7 without using this tile here? We have 2 tiles here. We can go up here to 3, 4, and 5. But at that point, we've run out of tiles, and we have to go on using tiles on the left here. So regardless of how many we use on the right here, we have to use this tile at least. Now, I think we should look at this 4 groups clue before we look at this line. So here we have a 4 groups clue. We have to add 4 separate groups in these tiles. And how many can we add? Here we can add 1 group. Here we can add a second group. And then in these 4 tiles, we can only add 2 more groups. Like I said before, in 5 tiles you can add a maximum of 3 groups, but if we don't have 5 tiles, we can no longer add 3 groups. In 4 tiles, you only have access to 2 groups, either 1 tile here and 1 tile here, or 1 here and 1 there, or maybe a 2 chain and 1 here. Doesn't matter, but there is no way to add 3 separated tiles in 4 tiles, because you need 1 gap between each tile. So in these 4 tiles, we will have 2 groups, or can only have 2 groups, and then we have to use these 2 tiles for the 3rd group and the 4th group. Because of that, we've now completed this 4 line, which already has 4 tiles, and these tiles can be disconnected. This 1 is already done, and we solve these tiles normally, and then here this 7 cluster now has 3 tiles, and we only have access to 4, 5, 6, and 7, so we need to use all of the tiles it has access to. Also, let's keep this one up. Now, finally, this is also a little complicated. This 6 cluster here, we need to add 5 more tiles to it. And we need to think about what we can add from this line. In this line, we have to have a gap somewhere, and that gap has to be in one of these 2 tiles. If we don't have a gap in these 2 tiles, if we mark both of these 2 tiles, then we would only have 1 group, 2 groups, 3 groups, and either one of these would not add another group. So either this tile or this tile will have to be deleted, and if we think about the 6, if this tile were to be deleted, then the 6 only has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's not possible. If this one is deleted, the 6 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 access available to it. So we have to delete this tile, we cannot delete this one, and we have to mark all of the tiles the 6 has access to. And then finally we need to add our 4th group for this 4 groups clue right here. And that completes this first Fern. Oh boy, that's like an entire video length in and of itself, and that's only a third of it. So, let's continue on. Here we have a 3 cluster tile here. This only has 1. Sorry, oh my god, I'm gonna get so scatterbrained by the end of this. This 3 has 1 tile, needs to go down here for 2. And then as we saw before, we have to use one of these 2 tiles, which means the one connected to both of them cannot be marked, or we would only be able to make a 4 chain. So that is disconnected. We get a 3 tile, which has to use 1 tile here, and then 2 and 3 here. Now we can no longer use this tile, or we make a 5 cluster for the 3, so that's disconnected, and this is marked. We get a 5 area here that has 5 tiles already, so this one is disconnected. The one here is done. This is marked. and this is a minimum 2 line, so since we have one tile here, we have to add this one for a minimum 2 chain. Now at this point, this minimum 5, this 5 cluster rather, has to go on down here to get 3 more tiles. But since we need to use one of these 2 tiles at least, this minimum 3 will need us to use, require us to use all 3 tiles. If we use this tile, we need to make it a 3 chain, so we need to mark all of them. If we use this tile, we again need to make a 3 chain, so we would have to use all of them. So since we need to use one of them, we have to mark all 3 for this line, which completes this 5 cluster, so this tile is disconnected. Now at that point, this 4 area has 2 tiles here, and we need to add 2 more out of these 3 tiles. And it's kind of a similar thing here. Here we have a minimum 2, and we have to add 2 tiles here. So even if we use this tile, that would mean that we only have 3 tiles for the 4, and we still have to use at least one of these tiles. And because we need to use at least one of these tiles, we have to use both because it has to be a minimum 2 chain. So we have to mark a 2 chain here, completing this 4 area, so this tile is now deleted. We get some normal tiles here. 2 groups here in 3 tiles. We have to separate the center to get 2 separated groups. This maximum 2, we have 2 tiles. We don't know which one is going to be a 2 chain, but we can already say that since we have 5 tiles here, this center tile cannot be marked. If we were to mark this tile, then we no longer have any way of making a 2 chain. If we mark this tile and this one, that would make a 3 chain, or this tile and this one would make a 3 chain, so we no longer have a way to make a 2 chain, like I said. So this center tile has to be deleted at this point. Now here, minimum 2 chain again, we have to mark this tile and complete this line. And here, minimum 3, we have a tile here, we have to make a minimum 3 chain, so 2 and 3. But since we already have a 3 chain here, we could mark another tile here for a 4 chain. And if we think about the 6 cluster here, we have 5 tiles already marked. What would happen if we don't use this tile here? Then if we delete this tile, we have to use one of these 2 tiles to complete the 6. But since we have a minimum 2 here, if we use this tile, that would mean we have to use at least this tile as well. Or if we use this tile, we have to use one of these 2 tiles as well, meaning we add 2 tiles to the 6, giving it 7 tiles instead. So we cannot use either of these 2 tiles to complete the 6, and we have to use this tile to make a 4 chain in the minimum 3. And now the 6 cluster is done, so disconnect this tile. And this line is done as well. And we get some normal tiles now. Max 2 has to have a 2 chain and 3 tiles, so the center tile has to be marked. I don't think I need to explain that again. This 5 line has 4 tiles, and then we have 1 more tile available. But here we have a 3 that has 4 tiles available to it. So since we only have 1 tile left in this line, we can only use one of these 2 tiles at most. And this 3 needs to use 1 tile here, and then has to use these 2 tiles. And because of that, these 2 tiles will be done, or one of these will be marked, completing this line, so none of the other tiles can be marked at that point. We get the 4 here that marks all of these, the 2 here, and now that completed this line, or this 3, so this 5 line is now completed. Let's leave this for now. We have this 8 cluster that already has 8 tiles, so all of the tiles connected to it can be removed. And then we solve some normal tiles here. This 5 cluster has 1 tile and has to go down here for 2 at least. The 2 is done now, and this 2 is done now. The 3 here marks these 2 tiles. And the 5 cluster has 4 tiles and has to go down here for the final 5th tile. And at that point, we have to disconnect the connecting tiles to it. And then this for the 2. Here, we have 3 tiles already, so all of the tiles in this line can be deleted. Now here, this 5 cluster has 3 tiles, and we need to add 5 more tiles. But here, we have a 1, so we can only use one of these 2 tiles at most. Or, well, we have to use one of them. So we have 3 tiles here, we can have 4 tiles here, and then we have to use this tile in order to get to more tiles. So we have to mark this tile for 4, and that completes this one and completes this one. So now we have to add this tile, completing the 5, and this one for the final 1 here. This 0 is already done. We didn't even need to think about the not 1. Not that it matters much. and we solve normal tiles. Minimum 2 here, we have 1 tile here, we have to make it a minimum 2 chain, and this tile cannot be a minimum 2 chain, so that has to be disconnected. 2 groups and 3 tiles, we can't use the center. Maximum 1, we have 1 tile here, we can't make a 2 chain, 1 tile here, we can't make a 2 chain. We get the 3 here, max 1 again, can't make a 2 chain. Now this 3 has 2 tiles here, and here we have a maximum 2, but we also have a minimum 2. So in this line, we can only make 2 chains. Any line, any tile we mark has to be a 2 chain exactly. Because of that, we can no longer mark any of these tiles, because that would give 4 tiles to this 3. So we have to disconnect these tiles, completing the 3 like so, and the 1 here is now done. And we move onward down here. Now we have this 7 here. We have a 3 cluster with 2 tiles. In these 3 tiles, we will mark 1 more tile for this 3 cluster, and then it will be done. So if we count the 7 here, we have 2 tiles, we'll have 3, and then 4, 5, 6, and 7. We have to mark all of the remaining tiles. Because we marked this tile, we now can't mark either of these tiles because that would make a 4 cluster. So these are now disconnected, and this has to be the final tile for the 3 cluster. And that gets disconnected, and we mark these tiles for the 3 and 4. Now here, this 7 already has 7 tiles, so these 2 tiles can be disconnected. The 2 here is done, and this is done, and that's complete now. This 1 is already done, and the 4 here. 2 groups and 3 tiles, we can't use the center, and these tiles are marked. Now here, a 6 area, we have 3, 4, 5, 6, so these tiles are disconnected. And that's now done. Now here, we have a 2 groups area, we have 1 group here, we have 2 groups here, and we can't add any of these tiles because that would be a 3rd group. So all of them are disconnected. We get the 3 here, which makes a 3 cluster that's already completed, so all of the tiles connected to it have to be removed. And we mark some normal tiles. Can we look at this already? Yeah, we can. We have 2 tiles for this 6 area, and we only have 4 more remaining, so we have to mark all 4 remaining tiles. This 3 cluster here already has 3 tiles, so disconnect all of the tiles connecting to it. And move on up here. We get these 3. Let's leave this for now a little bit and look at this maximum 2 instead. Maximum 2 area, we have a 2 chain here. We can't make a 3 chain, so this has to be disconnected. We have a 2 chain here, so we can't make a 3 or more chain here, so these have to be disconnected. And we get that for the 3, and the 2 is complete here. Now that's marked, and let's leave this for now and just complete the stuff we've left over here. This 2 is already done, and this is marked, some normal tiles here. That completed this line of 3, so these tiles are removed, and the line is complete. And here in this line, we again have a minimum 2, maximum 2, so we can only have 2 chains. So since we have a 2 chain, we have to disconnect this tile. That gives us a 5, so we complete that. And now again, we have a tile here, we have to make it a minimum 2 and a maximum 2, so disconnect this tile. Here in this line, we have a maximum 1, so any tile can't be connected to any adjacent tile or it would make a 2 chain. So these 2 have to be deleted, and this tile has to be deleted from this one. Now at that point, yeah, let's focus on this little branch here. We have a not 3 cluster that has 3 tiles exactly and can't have that. We have to add in at least 1 more tile to not make it 3 tiles. So we have to add this one, completing the 4 here, so this is disconnected. That gives us a minimum 2 with 1 tile here. We have to add at least 2, and then we have to preserve a 2 chain, so this tile is disconnected. That gives us some 1s, and this cluster is now done, and this line is now done. This 4 area has 4 tiles already now, so this is disconnected. Here we have a max 3 tile in 4 tiles. We have to make a 3 chain. So once again, since we have 4 tiles, we need to make a 3 chain, we have to use the 2 center tiles. If we disconnect either of these tiles, we can no longer make a 3 chain. We can only make a 3 chain this way or this way. So regardless, these are marked, which completes our 3 chain, and this tile is disconnected. This maximum 1 has a tile here, so we can't connect up the adjacent one, and that's now done. Now over here, we get this tile for the 2. This, wait, hold on, yeah, this tile for the 1 as well. This 4 area now has 4 tiles, so these ones are disconnected. And we get these tiles here, This 4 cluster has to go on here for the final tile, and then have these disconnected. This 3 area already has 3 tiles, so disconnect this tile. Mark the normal tiles here. There's a max 2 area, has a 2 chain here. We can't have more than a 2 chain, so these tiles have to be disconnected. And this 2 is now done. And we get that. Now at that point, this line of 3 is already completed, so these tiles are all removed. And we get some normal tiles here. Here we have a maximum 2. We have a 2 chain, so we can't mark more than that, so that has to be disconnected. A max 1 with 1 tile here. We can't make a 2 chain, so disconnect that. And solve some normal tiles. That now completed this line of 3, so disconnect this tile. Alright, I'm doing one of those interjections again, because I feel like I kind of overcomplicated this area and spent way too long trying to explain it, and you can really just explain it in a much simpler way, so let's just do this much quicker. We have a 5 groups area. We need to have 5 groups within all of these tiles. We have 1 group already. Now, how many groups can we place? We could have a group here for 2, and then we need to have 3 groups within these 7 tiles. What would happen if we don't have a group here at the edge tile? Which is pretty obvious, you know, like you would think this edge tile has to have a group, because what happens if it doesn't? If we were to remove this tile, then we have to have 3 groups in these 6 tiles, and that's no longer possible. If we mark this tile, we would have to disconnect these 2 tiles in order to be able to make another group, and then we're left with a cluster of 3 that we can't make 2 groups in. So if this tile is removed, we can't fit 3 groups in these 6 tiles, and the 5 groups cannot be finished. So this one has to be marked, and then we have to disconnect this tile, because if we mark this one, then the same problem happens. We have to disconnect these, and then we can only fit 4 groups in here. So we have to disconnect this, and since we can't fit 3 groups in these tiles, we can only have 1 and 2, or 1 and 2, or 2 cluster, or whatever, maybe this one and this one. You don't know that part, but we can only have 2 groups maximum. We have to have 3, 4, and 5, so this one has to be marked as well. At that point, we can just look at the center tile here. We have 1, 2, 3 groups, and if we were to add a group here, 4, then all of the remaining tiles would not add another group, so this one can't be marked. We can delete that. And then here we get a 2 with 1 tile. We have 1 of these tiles marked, and then the 3 here will have 1 tile here and has to have 2 and 3. Now, to have 1, 2, 3, 4, to have a 5th group, we have to skip 1 tile and add this one, and then disconnect this tile. Really not as hard to get through as I was gearing it up to be, but that's that. Now at this point, we have this max 6 area here. And we have a 3 chain here, a 1 and a 2 and a 1, but we don't have a 6 chain yet. We have to add a 6 chain somewhere in these remaining tiles, which means this 2 chain has to be the 6 chain. If it's not, if we disconnect this tile, we only have 4 tiles remaining here. So this has to be made into a 6 chain somehow. So if we start from here 2, we have to go onward here for 3 tiles, then we have to add at least one of these 2 for 4, but we don't know which one. It could be both, it could be 1, but at least we'll have 4 tiles, at most we'll have 5 tiles. And even if we do add both, we still have to add another tile to get a 6 chain. So this tile has to be marked regardless. That gives us a 6 cluster, and we know that this 6 cluster will be connected to this 6 chain because it has to have at least one of these 2 tiles. We know that from the 6 chain. We have 3 here, at least 4, 5, and then potentially one of these 2 or one of these 2. We don't know if it's both of these, or both of these. But because of that, the 6 cluster here will be completed using these tiles here. So we have 3, we have 4, we will have 5 and 6 in these tiles, and nothing that is connected to the 6 cluster here can be marked, because the 6 will be completed eventually. At this point, the 3 here, 3 area, has 1 tile, and again, we know that we have to add 2 more tiles in here, either both of these or one combination of these 3 tiles. So, since we have a 3 area here, we have 1 tile here, we have to add in 2 and 3 of these tiles, and none of these tiles can be marked. That gives us a 0 here, and now we only have 6 tiles available for this cluster and this max 6 area. Now we get a 2 cluster here, and this is done. 3 here, just some normal tiles. Now at this point, we have a 3 groups clue here. We have to add 3 groups in 5 tiles, which we've seen in the past. That is the maximum amount of groups we can add. So we have to add as many tiles as we can. We have to start as early as possible, and then disconnect a tile, add a second group, disconnect a tile, and then add a third tile. In 5 groups, we can only just barely fit 3 groups. So we have to add in 3 separated tiles and disconnect the room between them. That completes this 2 and this 2. And we get some basic tiles here. Here, this 6 cluster only has access to 6 tiles, so we have to use all of them. And this one is done as well. This 2 area has 2 tiles, so these tiles have to be deleted. This 4 area has 1 tile. We need to add 3 more tiles in here. But in this line, we already have 3 tiles marked. So we can only add 2 more tiles in here at most. So out of these 3 tiles, we can only add 2. So this 4 area has 1 tile. We can only add 2 and 3. So we have to add this tile for the 4th tile. And the 4 will need 2 tiles out of these 3, which will complete the 5 line here. So this tile that's outside of the area cannot be marked. And the 2 here is already done, so these are disconnected. And we now get these 2 marked for the 5 line and the 4 area. And then this 4 cluster has to use these 2 tiles to complete itself. This 2 line is now done, so disconnect these tiles. And we get some basic tiles again. Until that point. Now here we have a maximum 3 area with 1 tile here, but we have to make a 3 chain, and we only have 4 tiles available. So since we need to make a 3 chain in 4 tiles, we have to use the 2 center tiles. The only way to make a 3 chain is this way or this way. So regardless, these have to be marked. That gives us a 3 cluster, and we know the 3 cluster will be completed using this tile or this tile because this maximum 3 area needs a 3 chain within it. So this cluster will be done after one of these tiles, and anything that is touching it at that point cannot be marked. So all of these tiles connected to it can already be disconnected. That gives us a 1 here, which already has 1, so disconnect these tiles. And we get a 2 cluster here, that's done like so. And now the 3 cluster has to be completed here and get disconnected there. And some basic tiles here. 3 cluster here has 1, 2, and 3 and disconnected. And we get some zeros here. Basic tiles. Don't really need to worry about this. I keep dragging the view, sorry about that. 3 tiles here, 1, 2, and 3, and then disconnected. Here we have a, okay, let's wait with that one. Here we have a 4 area with only 4 tiles, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now at this point, this 3 area has 2 tiles already marked, and we only have 1 more tile marked in these 3 tiles. Now down here, this 4 area has 2 tiles, and needs 2 tiles out of these 3 tiles. But if you look at the overlap, this 3 can only use 1 of these 2 tiles, which means the 4 has 2, can only have 3, and needs to use this tile for the 4th tile. And because we need to use one of these tiles, this 3 will be completed, so this tile cannot be marked. That gives us a maximum 2 tile, which has to have a 2 chain in 3 tiles here, so the minimum, the center tile, why do I keep saying minimum for a center? The center tile has to be marked, and then disconnect this tile to preserve the 2 chain. At this point, this 5 area here has 1, 2, and 3. We know we only use 1 tile out of these 2, so we'll have 4, and then we have to mark this tile for 5. That completes this 3 cluster, so disconnect these tiles, and we can move on there. And then this 7 area has 3, 4, and needs 5, 6, and 7. That now completed these 2 areas, so this tile is removed. At this point, this 2 area has 1 and needs 2, but at this point, this 5 cluster has to use this tile. We can't not mark this tile because then this 5 only has 4 tiles available. So we know that the 5 will have to go on here, which gives us a tile in this maximum 1 line, so we can't mark another tile in sequence to it. So this one has to be disconnected, giving us a 4 tile, so all of these have to be marked, and this line is now done. And this cluster now has 5, so all of the tiles connected to it can be removed. And we get basic tiles here until this point, area with 3 tiles, disconnect this one. And we are finally done with a, oh, never mind, we are not done. This one, 4 area, 1, 2, 3, 4, disconnect this tile, and then these 2 are marked for the 3. We are finally done with a second fern leaf. Yeah, we'll see if I re-record some of this stuff. Some of these explanations I'm not super happy with, but I'm not sure if I can phrase them in a different way, but we'll see. Anyway, let's get into the third and final fern leaf. Here we have a 6 cluster with 1 tile. We have to start by going 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we need 1 more tile. Because we need 1 more tile, we have to use one of these 2 tiles, which means we cannot use this tile that's marked, that's connected to both of these ones. If we were to mark this tile, then the 6 cluster here would have 5, 6, and 7, or 6 and 7. So this one has to be disconnected, which gives us the tiles in this line already marked, and this is already done. Move onward down here. Here we have just a max 2, so we don't know, but this 4 cluster has 2 tiles. We have to go down here for 3, and then same thing again, we need to use one of these tiles for the final tile, which means this tile cannot be marked. Here we also, well, right away we have a 2 chain here now, so this 2 chain can't be connected up here, or we can't make a 3 chain here, so this is disconnected, which now gives us the final tile in the 4 cluster, and this tile for the 2. Now this 5 cluster has 1 tile, has to go here for 2, which gives us a tile in this line, which has a minimum 3, maximum 5. So this tile has to be part of a minimum 3 chain, so 1, 2, and 3. At that point, we can't add another tile, because if we do, we make a 4 chain, which is fine, but then we can't have it be the 5 chain, because if we make a 5 chain here, this tile would make, this cluster would be connected to 6 tiles total, so that doesn't work. So we can't make a 5 chain up here, and if we add another tile and make only a 4 chain, then we don't have enough tiles remaining here to add another 3 and another 5 chain, because we have to have one specific 3 chain and one 5 chain in this line. So this has to be disconnected, and we have to have this as our 3 chain, and then we get a 1 here, and we have to fit our 5 chain in here in these 5 remaining tiles. We get some basic tiles to solve here. Not much to say about that, so just solve as much as you can. Max 1 here, we can't make a 2 chain, so disconnect that. Max 3 in 4 tiles, we have to mark the 2 center tiles, because that's the only way to make a 3 chain, this way or this way, and now the 3 chain is complete, so disconnect that tile, and this is marked. Now here, 7 tiles, we have 5 here, 6 and 7, so that's already done, so disconnect these tiles. And again, some basic tiles here. Max 1, can't connect up this tile. Minimum 2, but we have a 2 chain already, and we have 5 tiles in total. If we were to mark another tile here, we would get a 3 chain, and then we don't have room for another separate 2 chain to fulfill the minimum 2. So this tile cannot be marked, we can delete this tile. And that gives us a 4 here, and the minimum 2 requires us to make this into a 2 chain, so this has to be marked. This 4 area has 1, 2, 3, 4, so these tiles are removed, and we can mark these ones here. Here we have a maximum 3 chain, so we have a 3 chain here, we have to disconnect the tiles next to it, and mark these ones. Maximum 2, we have a 2 chain, so disconnect the tiles connected to it. And some normal tiles here. Max 2 in 3 tiles, we have to use the center again. Max 3 in 4 tiles, we have to use the 2 center tiles. Like so. And then I guess we can look at this one. We have 7, 2, 4, 6, 7, and these tiles are removed. This 2 is already done, this 3 is done. Here we have a 2 groups clue. We have 1 group here. This would not add another group. This is the only tile that can add a second group. And then we have to disconnect this tile to preserve the separated 2 groups. We get 4 here. This maximum 2 has a 2 chain here, so we can't connect up this tile. This 2 is now done, and this is marked, and this line is now finally done. So at that point, we go here to this maximum 2 line. We have a 2 chain here, we have to disconnect these tiles. And at that point, oh whoops, I accidentally removed this one. We have a maximum 3 line with a 3 chain here and a 3 chain here. We can't add in this tile or it would make a 4 chain. So that's disconnected, giving us a 5 tile, so we have to add in these 2 tiles. And now the max 2, we have a 2 chain, we can't connect up more tiles in that line. So now we just solve normal tiles again, minimum 2, we have 1 tile here, we have to make it a 2 chain, and then preserve the 2 chain, like so. This 3 line now has 3 tiles, so this one is disconnected, and it's a 1, so just continue on here until that point. Here we have a max 2 in 3 tiles. We have to use the center to make a 2 chain either this way or this way, so this one is guaranteed to be marked. That gave us a 2 cluster, which again will be completed using this tile or this tile since we need a 2 chain for this max 2, so this tile cannot be marked or both of these would have to be deleted. That gives us a maximum 1, so this tile can't be connected to this one or it would make a 2 chain. Now we get our 2 cluster here. We need 2 groups for this tile. We have 1 group here. We have to add in this tile for the second group. Again, max 1, we can't make a 2 chain, so disconnect this tile. And now 3 groups in 5 tiles. We already know that in a line of 5, we can only just fit in 3 groups by having 1 tile and then disconnect the next one, add 1, disconnect 1, and add 1. Max 1, well, the 3 here first. Max 1, can't have a 2 chain here, so disconnect this tile. And here we need 2 groups. We have 1 group. This does not add a new group. We have to add in this tile and then disconnect this tile to preserve 2 separate groups. At that point, we look at this 7, which has 1, 2, 3, 4. And here for this 1, we can at most add 5 and then 6 and 7. So we have to add in these tiles, which completes this 1. So this shared tile between them, has to be disconnected. And this is now marked to complete the 7 line. This 2 is done. Let's move on here for a little bit. And then here, this 3 cluster can't connect up to these 2 tiles because it would connect up to too many tiles for a 3 cluster. So these are deleted. This 3 is already done. And the 3 now has to go down here for 2 and 3 and get disconnected here. This 6 area has 1, 2, 3 and needs 4, 5, and 6. At that point, this maximum 3 area has only 4 tiles and we need to make a 3 chain within those. So once again, we need to use the 2 center tiles. If we disconnect either one of these, we can't make a 3 chain anymore. So now we get our 3 chain and this tile is disconnected. Now at that point, this is another little tricky section. Here we have a not 3 line. Let's think about what that means. Actually, we have a not 3 line and a not 2 line. So in this line of 4 tiles, we cannot have 2 tiles and we cannot have 3 tiles. So what tiles could we have? We could have no tile, we could have 1 tile, or we could have 4 tiles. If we have no tile, if we remove all of the tiles here, then this 5 cluster only has 3 tiles, would not have any here, and then we could have 4 tiles here, but the 2 would then be complete, so this tile is disconnected, and the 5 cluster is left with only 4 tiles. So that doesn't work. We can't have no tile in this line. Can we have all tiles in it? Can we have 4 tiles in it? If we mark all 4, then this 5 cluster suddenly gets 7 tiles, so that doesn't work either. So our only option is to have 1 tile in this line. And that 1 tile has to be connected to this 5 chain, because if it's not, if we use this tile and delete these, then once again this 5 has 3 tiles and can only get 4 tiles before it's cut off by the 2. So we have to use one of these 3 tiles and not this one. So we can delete this tile, giving us a 0, so these are now deleted. We get this tile marked, which now gives us the tile that we needed, so this one has to be disconnected, and the 5 has to be completed using this tile. And this line is done, and we get the 0 here. 2 groups and 3 tiles, we can't use the center tile. 3 groups in these tiles, we have 2 groups, we can't add a new group here, so we have to use this tile to add a group and disconnect this one. Minimum 2, we have 1 tile here, have to add 2, 1 tile here, have to add 2, and then we can't add up this middle tile or we don't preserve a 2 chain. At this point, what is it you do here? Oh, right, this one. I missed this tile. This 3 line here has 3 tiles already, so these are disconnected, giving us these 2 tiles here, which now completed this 4 line, which now has 4 tiles, so these are disconnected. This 1 here is done. And then this 5 has 2 tiles, and we need to add these 3 in to complete it. And now here, we have a minimum 3 maximum 4 in this line. So we have to have a 3 chain and we have to have a 4 chain somewhere. We can't have the 4 chain connected to this 6, because if we have it here, then we get all 4 of these tiles, and this would be a 7 cluster. So the 4 chain cannot start here, it cannot start here, it cannot start here, and it cannot start here. If it starts here and goes all the way here, we again get a 7 cluster. So the earliest point the 4 chain could start is right here, and we would get 1, 2, 3, 4. Or the latest point it could start is here for 1, 2, 3, and 4. So regardless, these 3 tiles here have to be marked for the 4 chain in this area, and then one of these 2 tiles has to be the 4th one. And at that point, we also have to think about the 3 chain that we need here. This 6 has to use 1 tile in this line at least, and because it has to use 1 tile, it has to use 3 because of the minimum 3. So if we use this tile, we would mark these 3 tiles. If we use this tile, we would mark these 3 tiles, and we can't disconnect 2 tiles here because then we would get a 3 chain connecting up to this whole cluster, which would ruin the 6 cluster. So we know that the 3 chain rather, has to be in these 3 tiles or these 3 tiles, which means we can mark these 2 center tiles. That gives us 5 for the 6 cluster, and we know that the 6 will be completed using this tile or this tile, which means that this connected tile to it cannot be marked, and we can disconnect that tile, remove that tile. And then the 1 is done here, and we get the 3 here, and these tiles marked, we get the 4 chain now, so disconnect that. And the 1 here is done, and just some normal tiles. And here we have to think about the overlap between these. So here we have 3 tiles in this entire area. Here we have 4 tiles in this entire area, but in this shared area we can at most have 3. So because we can only have 3 tiles here, the 4th tile for this 4 area has to be here. And because we have to have 3 tiles here for this 4, we cannot use any of the tiles outside of that area for this 3 area. So these are disconnected. And now we get these 2 for the 2 here. Can we already look at this? No. But we can look at, this one. So the 3 area, we have 1 here. We need to add 2 more tiles in here. But this 2 cluster can only have at most 1 of these 2. So since we have 1 tile here, we have to add 2 here, and then 1 of these 2 completing this 2 cluster. And because we've added this tile, we can't add this one, or we would make it a 3 cluster. So this one is now disconnected, and that tile has to be marked for the final 3 and 4 area tile. The 2 cluster now is done, so disconnect these tiles. And we get normal tiles here. This 6 area has 1 tile and needs 5 tiles in these 6 tiles, but this 2 can only have 2 tiles out of these 3. So since we have 1 tile here, we can at most have 2 and 3 here. We have to have 4, 5, and 6. Now at that point, we also need to add in 2 more tiles in here, and because we need to add 2 tiles, they have to be part of this 5 cluster. This 5 cluster, well, first of all, we can just think about the 5 cluster, which has 3 tiles, and regardless of whether this one is marked, we have to mark this tile, because that's, if this tile is removed, we would only have 4 tiles for this 5 cluster. So this one has to be marked, and then this 2 needs 1 more of these tiles marked, which are both connected to the 5 cluster. So the 5 cluster will be completed using 1 of these tiles, and this tile that's connected to this tile cannot be marked, and we can disconnect that one. Now at that point, we get a 1 group, and we have a group here already. We could add in this tile, but we cannot add in this tile. If we add this tile, we would have to add in this one as well to preserve it as 1 group, which would add 6 tiles for this 5 cluster. So this tile can be deleted at this point, giving us a 3 that we can mark all the tiles for. Now the 5 cluster is done here, and we get a 5 area with 5 tiles already, so this one can be removed. I have to sneeze 1 second. Alright, now we look at this 7 here, which has 1 tile here, and has to have 6 more tiles, and we only have 6 tiles available, so all of these have to be marked. That gives us a 6 cluster that already has 6 tiles, so all the tiles connected to it have to be disconnected. We get 3 tiles, we need 3 groups in this area, So we have one group here, and we have to add in 2 more groups in these 3 tiles, which means we can't use the center tile, and we have to add in these 2 tiles. Let's complete this back area here that we left behind. Here we have a 3 cluster with 1, 2, and 3 tiles. It has to go down here and get disconnected, and then this is marked, giving us a 2 cluster that has to go down here for 2, and that's now done. Now here we have a 4 cluster with 3 tiles. We can't connect it up here because that would connect it up to this tile as well, giving us 5. So this one has to be disconnected, and this has to be the 4th tile. So now we can disconnect the tiles connected to it and move on here. Here we have a 2 area with 2 tiles, so this tile is disconnected. And the 1 here is done, and this 2. This 5 cluster only has access to 5 tiles, so all of them have to be marked. This 5 here has 3 tiles marked, and we need to have 2 more tiles in these 5 tiles. But for this 12, we have 6 tiles total, and we need to add 6 tiles in this area. If you look at the overlap, we can only add 2 tiles out of these 3 for this 5. So if we count the 12, we had 6 tiles, we can have 7 and 8, and then we need 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we have to mark all of these tiles, and we will need 2 tiles in this shared area, which will complete the 5 cluster, the 5 area, so these tiles can be removed. And then we get the 3 here, and the 2 is done, and these areas are now completed. Now we do the same thing here with the 8. Actually, hold on. First, this area, the 2, is already done. Just solved that. This 3 cluster has 1 and needs to go 2 and 3 and get disconnected. And we get that. Now we can look at the 8 and 9 here, which also shares some tiles. So here, this 9 has 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and needs to have 2 tiles in this area. This 8 has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and has to have 2 tiles in this area, which is all shared by the 9, so the 8 will need 2 tiles out of these 4, which will complete the 9 as well, so this lone tile outside of the area cannot be marked. That gives us a 0, so we delete these 2 tiles, and now we only have two remaining tiles here, so both of them have to be marked for these 2 area clues. At that point, this 2 is done. We get that, some normal tiles here. Until that point. Now here, we need to add 3 groups in 5 tiles. We've seen that before. Just add all the tiles you can and 1 gap between them. And normal tiles to solve here. Now we can just count these ones. We have the 7 cluster here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we need 2 more tiles in here. This 5 area has 1 and 2, and we need 2 more tiles in here, so 3 and 4, 3 and 4, and then we need to add this tile outside of it for the final tile for the 5 cluster. That gives us the 5 area, sorry. That gives us a 2 cluster, which needs to go 1 and 2, and they get disconnected from the other tiles. And now we add this final tile for the areas. This line is done as well. This area only has 3 tiles and needs to have all of them marked. Here we have a minimum 3 line, which has to have a 3 chain in these 4 tiles, so we have to use the 2 center tiles here, and then 1 of these 2 tiles. This 4 area has 1 tile here and needs to add 2, 3, and 4, so that's done now, and the 1 here gets that tile disconnected. Now we have to add this tile for the final in the 3 chain. This 2 groups clue has 2 groups. We can't connect them up or it would only be 1 group. So this 2 is done. This 5 cluster has 2 tiles, has to go down here for 3, 4, and 5. This line of 4 only has 4 tiles available, so we have to mark all of them. The 1 here is done. This 6 has 3 tiles and has to go down here for at least 4, and here for at least 5. And that completed this 2, so disconnect this tile. And then we get a 3 area here that's already done with 3 tiles, so these 2 are disconnected. This 6 cluster now has 5 tiles and has to go down here for 6 and get disconnected here. The 2 here is done as well. This area of 4 has 1 tile and needs 3 more, so we have to add in all of those. This 1 tile is done, and the 0 here. And here we have a minimum 3 area with 1 tile here. We have to make this into a minimum 3 chain, so 1, 2, and 3. And we have to preserve 1 3 chain in this area, so this tile can no longer be marked. The 1 here is done. That gives us a 3 groups area, which again you can think about the exact same way as a line. We have one tile here, we have 5 tiles total, we have to add in 3 groups in that line, so this tile has to be disconnected from this one, and then we add a second group, disconnect it, and add a third group. And these tiles are normal, and finally the last one. So there you go, that's Silver Fern. Also a very, very long level. Fun times. Again, I don't know if I'll re-record parts of that, but maybe I'll just have to settle for it. I'm not super happy with the explanations for some of these, and it gets kind of hard to stay focused in these like extremely long endurance levels and explain everything thoroughly and stuff, so you'll have to excuse some of the sloppiness in these latter videos, and I'm sure the final one, Snowflake, will also be very, very sloppy, but at least it should give you a good overview of the tricky parts and all that. So, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time for the final time in Snowflake. Bye bye!